If God is all-powerful and all-knowing, then why would he create Adam and Eve if he knew they were going to sin?
Also, does God still love you when you're messing up and when you know you're messing up?
Consider this conversation ignited. Hey guys, welcome back to Ignite. My name is Aaron Patterson and I am a sophomore out of the School of Journalism and Communications.
Hey guys, my name is Sarah Manuel. I am also a sophomore out of the School of Journalism and Communication, and guess what we're here doing today?
My guess, just going off of my gut, is that we're going to get into another unnecessarily deep conversation.
And you wouldn't be wrong, because that's what Ignite's all about.
Fantastic. Good. Yes, today what we did was we took over Cass's role, went out on the street, and asked everyone the same question, which is, what question stumps you when it comes to Christianity? What question do you struggle with when it comes to Christianity, or Seventh-day Adventism, or spirituality? So it's going to get pretty deep today.
Yeah.
One of the questions that I have when it comes to spirituality is what constitutes salvation and who defines it? I know the Bible does, but who defines the Bible defining it?
This is a very good question. I think mine would be, why do bad things happen to good people?
Yeah, so let's just go ahead and, let's figure out what's going to happen today.
Yeah.
Let's see how this goes.
Today we're going to be going out to a whole bunch of people out today because it's like 72 degrees in March here in Tennessee. We're going to be asking people the question, what question do you struggle with when it comes to Christianity? And then we're going to be taking the questions that we get from that and asking our special guest. So it's going to be really cool.
We were finally let outside, but yeah, let's go.
What question do you struggle with when it comes to Christianity?
I guess why bad things are allowed, why bad things happen to good people.
If God knew all this was going to happen in the first place, why would he let Adam and Eve have a temptation in the garden? It's just like, where are we headed right now? What direction are we going in? Like, what's the end goal right now?
What stops you from wanting to make service a primary part of your life?
I've heard people say that there's no marriage in heaven, but I've also heard people say that there is marriage in heaven, and that's kind of like one of the questions that boggles me.
Will people who haven't experienced marriage be married in heaven? Will they have something new?
How can he be in multiple places at the same time? And same with prayer.
Will I be able to get married in heaven or something, or do I have to do it right now?
If God is good, why is there pain and suffering?
Why did God sometimes purposely cut people off from the world, like for example Sodom and Gomorrah, even though he's a loving God?
Basically, does God still love you even when you mess up a lot and that you're messing up? Does he still forgive you and love you?
Why are Christians so pick and choose about their sins?
That was pretty good. It wasn't as good as it's been in the past, but I mean, they're learning.
Newbies. We just need Cass back, honestly.
It was cute. They didn't have any kind of outro or tossing or anything like that.
But it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, they'll work on it.
So here we have our guest speaker. Could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Sure. My name is Pastor Joseph Khabbaz, and I'm the Vice President for Spiritual Life and Chaplain here on campus.
Awesome.
I'm really glad we're finally getting to do this conversation because I've been wanting to talk with, is it still Campus Ministries?
Actually, there's been a rebrand. It's Office of Ministry and Missions, because although our ministry is on campus as well, we have a number of students that serve overseas in a number of different capacities. So it's many ways through our students a global ministry.
I've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time, so I'm super excited about this. So what we did is we went out and got a whole bunch of questions off of campus, difficult spiritual questions, and I mean spiritual difficult questions when it comes to Christianity.
So one of the questions that we had on the street was, if God knew, since God is all-knowing and he knows that Adam and Eve were going to sin, why did he create them anyways?
This is such a important question, but probably this idea of pain and suffering and God's foreknowledge as well, it's one of the most difficult questions, and I don't think we'll know the gamut and the fullness of that answer until we're in heaven. But every time I stub my toe, right, I ask Adam and Eve, why? Why did you disobey? Sometimes whenever we face challenges, I think even more seriously of those on campus that are grieving right now because they've lost loved ones, and it takes us back to the question, God, if you knew Adam and Eve were going to fall and sin, why Why did you create them? Why
How
did you
would a
let it
loving
happen?
God do that?
How could a loving God do that? And so natural disasters, fires in California, fires in Australia, every time we experience that pain, that question is asked. And it's really a question of theodicy, we would say theologically, and that's just simply a word that's made up of two words, God and justice, right? Like if God is good, why then do bad things happen in this world? And how can God's character, if he's a loving God, how can God's character be vindicated while we're experiencing pain here on earth? And so there's kind of two options here with God's foreknowledge. And there are some that believe God didn't really know Adam and Eve would sin. Some believe that, like God doesn't really have foreknowledge. That event caught him by surprise, and so he mustn't really know. Or the other alternative is God did know, and therefore their actions were predetermined. Like he kind of made them sin essentially because he caused it to happen. And that's that idea of fatalism, this idea that I don't really have free choice. So how can we reconcile those two things, right? Like how can we know that we do have free choice. God gave Adam and Eve a choice, but how do we reconcile that with God knowing before I even choose an action? And so as we're seeking to reconcile it, it's really it really is reflective of what's taking place now. So this is what I wrote. It's chronologically prior, but it's logically posterior. So
Unpack that one.
Yeah.
It sounds good.
So even though God knows something before it happens, his knowledge is based on our free will. And the actions that we would take based on our free will. I'm trying to unpack this because it's a really deep question, and if we're not careful, we can go down the route of thinking Adam and Eve didn't have a choice. They didn't have a choice. In fact, in Deuteronomy, it says that we do have a choice. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. Just to unpack this, today God says, I have given you the choice between life and death, between blessings and cursings. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life. God's desire for us is to choose life and not death. That's his desire. But because God is loving, the very essence of him is love. Love requires choice, right? Love requires freedom, and it's not only the freedom to accept God, it's also the freedom to reject him as well. God knew that Adam and Eve would reject him, but he knew that not because they didn't have free choice. They still had that free choice. He knew that chronologically before, but that didn't impact their free choice at that moment. So Adam and Eve were not made in terms of a defect. There was not a defect in them. They were made in God's image. They were made in a way that reflected God's true perfection of character, which is, he said, it was good. Everything he made, it was good. When he made man and woman, he said, it is very good. So they were made perfectly, but in the same respect, that perfection required their ability to reject God as well. And perfection involves the level of allowing rejection to take place because of love.
One of the other questions we got twice actually was about marriage in heaven. One was, will there be marriage in heaven? And another was, will I be able to get married in heaven if I don't here on earth?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I remember once thinking, this is probably not the, you sometimes think, God, if there's no marriage in heaven, I don't know if I want to be in heaven, right? Like some people.
Oh, man.
You kind of ask that and you kind of wonder, like, would I really enjoy heaven if I couldn't get married? And people think about that. Maybe I wouldn't. But angels are having a wonderful time in heaven. And there is this idea that sometimes we have that based on our human understanding, maybe this idea of intimacy and sexuality is the greatest experience someone can have, right? But we have to realize that there will be levels of joys in heaven that we haven't even experienced here on earth as well.
Differently.
And so But as we think about this idea of will there be marriage in heaven, it's based on a text, and it's based on Matthew chapter 22. And I've got the text here, verse 30. And this is what Jesus says, "For in the resurrection they neither marry or are neither given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven." There's a couple of school of thoughts on this. One is that we will be like the angels in heaven, but when God creates a new earth, it could go to the Edenic model of Eden, where God will ask us to fill the earth again, maybe, or fill the universe, whatever it may be. So there is this understanding. There's a number of schools of thoughts on this. One saying that when we're back on earth, after the 1,000 years in heaven, we can be in marriage and given in marriage, but while we're in heaven, during those 1,000 years, it won't take place. That's one school of thought. The other school of thought is, no, it will be like the angels for all eternity. There will never be marriage again. And the other school of thought is, well, those that have only had maybe, like Adam and Eve, one partner will be in marriage. Okay, but the example that the Sadducees gave Jesus, he gave an example of what it would be like for those that, may have had multiple spouses. Because I think what the Bible wants to point out is, don't let that be a stumbling block. You'll want to be in heaven.
Yeah. I guess we're just going to have to find out when we get there.
Yeah.
But one of the other questions that we got from someone was, does God still love me when I mess up or when I keep messing up? And does he still love me even though I know I'm messing up?
Yeah, that's a great question. And there are times where we feel like, God, is there a limit to your love? Like I keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. And God, after I make a mistake this number of times, is your grace totally extinguished for my life? And there's a number of examples we could use in the Bible, but one that's probably most familiar to everyone is the example of Peter. And Peter is trying to share with Jesus, like, I am your guy, I am your man, I've got your back, you can count on me, we're gonna ride or die together, right? Like we're gonna go all the way. And then Jesus kind of turns to him and says, you're gonna reject me. But he says, you're not gonna reject me just once. You're not gonna deny me just twice. You're gonna actually deny me 3 times. And this is in a span of just a few hours probably, right? Like it's not like, oh, you're gonna deny me
over the course of your life.
Over the course of your life, this is in a span of just a few hours there. But he says, I pray that your faith will not fail you. And he says to him, I am praying for you. So Jesus firstly prays for us, even though he knows we're going to fail him. He still loves us, and he knows that we're going to mess up, but he still prays for us. And obviously after the resurrection, he meets with Peter to reassure him, right? He says, do you love me? Because I know I love you, but do you love me? And he asked Peter that question 3 times. The fact that he wanted to meet with him and reassure him showed that God's grace was not extinguished, that we can mess up a number of times, but we can always, always, always come back to God.
All right, I'm gonna stop talking now, just because we're doing this in 3 parts. I have so many more questions, and we have several more that we're gonna ask later on. But I'm super glad that we got to talk with you today. It's super cool.
Sure.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time. These are some hefty questions, as always.
Yeah. Welcome to Ignite. This is kind of how we do it around here. Yeah.
Anyways, to those of you online, thank you so much for joining us. Tune in next week. You want to tell them what next week is going to be about?
Yes, next week is part 2. And we're actually either going to have Pastor Joseph or Pastor Anna answering 3 or 4 more of the questions that we got on the street. Make sure to check out our Instagram at IGNITE Ignite SAU, not SAU Ignite. That's a different thing that didn't work out. IGNITE SAU. And stop what you're doing and like the video and comment and throw a bunch of words down there and comment some more difficult spiritual questions that we can ask. Because it's important as a Christian community to talk about stuff that we don't want to talk about and get uncomfortable. So
yeah. So we'll see you next time.